11 days before we buried my mother, my brother had the locks changed on a house he did not own. My name is Delia. I am 37. I am a senior title examiner, which means I spend my working life reading the chain of ownership on other people's property, tracing every deed and lien and easement back through the county records until I can say with certainty who holds what. He called a locksmith on a Thursday afternoon while my mother's body was still at the funeral home on Sandusky Street. He changed the front lock, the back lock, and the padlock on the detached garage. He posted a photograph of the new brass hardware in the family group chat with a caption about protecting what our parents built. 14 people responded with hearts. My aunt responded with a prayer. I did not respond at all. I opened my laptop, logged into the county recorder's public search portal the way I do 40 times a day for strangers, and I pulled up the instrument I already knew was there. Recorded 2019, volume, page, stamp, fee paid. A warranty deed with a reserved life estate. My brother believed the house would pass under the will. He believed the will was the whole story, because the will was the only document anyone in my family had ever bothered to read. Before I tell you what I put in the envelope I carried into her memorial luncheon, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I always wonder how far a story like this travels. Welcome back to Karma's Keeper, where the person nobody consulted turns out to be the person whose name is on the paperwork. If you have ever quietly covered a shortfall for your family, and then been told not to bring it up again, this one is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. But let me take you back 6 years, to a January when a mortgage servicer in Columbus was 31 days from filing. I grew up in Corley, Ohio, in a 2-story house on Ferris Row with aluminum siding the color of weak tea, and a back porch that my father screened in himself the summer I turned 9. He used the wrong gauge staples. For 28 years, one corner of that screen breathed in and out whenever the wind came off the reservoir, and every single one of us learned to sleep through the sound. We were not poor in the way that gets attention. We were poor in the way that shows up in the details. Powdered milk mixed half and half with the real thing. A furnace that ran until Christmas and then got turned down to 58. My mother cut coupons at the kitchen table with a pair of orange-handled scissors, and she kept the coupons in a plastic bread bag closed with a red twist tie, because she said a rubber band would eventually rot and wire would not. That is the detail I want you to hold on to. The red twist tie. There were 3 of us. Gareth was the oldest, 7 years above me. He was the one people described as having potential, which in our family functioned less like a compliment and more like a line of credit that never came due. He was good at explaining what he was going to do. He was less good at the part after that. Tobias came last. I was the one who did things, not out of virtue, out of temperament. I liked systems. I liked knowing where a thing was written down. At 16, I got a job at the Corley Public Library shelving returns, and I discovered the county records room in the basement of the municipal building, because the librarian sent me over to retrieve a plat map for a patron. There were long, flat drawers of maps and bound volumes of deeds going back to 1848, and the deputy clerk let me stay an hour past my errand. Her name was Priya, and she wore reading glasses on a chain of small green beads, and she showed me how to read a meets and bounds description out loud, like a set of walking directions. North 62 degrees east, 211 feet, to an iron pin. I went to work for a title company at 22. I have been doing it 15 years. I am the person a bank calls when a transaction is 9 days from closing and something in the chain does not reconcile. I have found forged signatures, unreleased judgment liens, a 1974 easement that a developer had spent $4 million pretending did not exist. My job is not glamorous. My job is to be the last person who checks. My family understood none of this. To them, I worked at an office. Once, at a graduation party, my uncle introduced me to a neighbor as the one who does the typing at the bank. Here is the pattern I want to show you rather than describe. When I was 24, my parents' car needed a transmission. I put $1,800 on a credit card. My mother stood in her kitchen with a dish towel over her shoulder and said, "You are such a help to me." Then she said, "Do not say anything to your brother. He would feel terrible." When I was 29, my father's stent surgery came with a bill, The insurance fought for 11 months. I called the hospital's billing department 9 times, got the charges reclassified, and paid the remainder. At Easter, Gareth explained to the table how he had handled the hospital. My mother let him. She caught my eye once over the ham and gave me a small, apologetic smile, and then she asked me to bring in more ice. That smile was the whole architecture of my childhood. Acknowledgement given privately, in a currency that could not be spent anywhere. My father died in 2017, aneurysm, in the driveway, on a Sunday. After the service, my mother sat on the screened porch with the corner of it breathing in and out, and she said, "I do not know how any of this works, Delia." He did all of it. She was right. He had done all of it, including the part where he had refinanced the property in 2011 to cover a stretch of unemployment, and never mentioned it. She was 63 years old, with a mortgage she had never seen a statement for. I pulled the record. I found a balance of $61,400, an escrow shortage, and by January of 2019, 4 missed payments and a demand letter. She had been paying what she could and hiding the rest in a drawer in the sideboard, under the good napkins. I sat at her kitchen table with the letters spread out and asked her one question. Do you want to keep the house? Or do you want to be somewhere smaller and not be afraid of the mail? She cried for about 9 seconds, which was the longest I ever saw her cry, and she said she wanted to die on that porch. So I paid it. All of it. I cashed out a retirement account, took the penalty, and wired the full payoff on a Tuesday morning in February. I have the confirmation number memorized the way other people memorize a child's birthday. And then, because of what I do for a living, I did the second part. I sat her down with an attorney in Marysville, named Louise Fenner, and I explained the instrument I wanted. A warranty deed conveying the property to me, with a life estate reserved to my mother. In plain language, it works like this. She remained the owner of her own life in that house. Nobody could remove her. Nobody could sell it out from under her. She paid her own taxes and slept in her own bed until the day she died. But the remainder interest, the part that continues after, belonged to me from the moment we recorded it. Not through a will, not through probate. It was already mine, waiting. My mother signed it in front of a notary with a cold sore and a stamp that stuck. On the way out to the parking lot, she held my arm and said, "I do not want your brothers to know." I asked her why. She said, "Because Gareth will make it about him being embarrassed, and then I will have to comfort him about my own house." I want to be honest with you. There was a part of me that was relieved. A quiet, unflattering part. I liked having something that was documented, and true, and unavailable for anyone to reassign at a holiday table. She said one more thing in that parking lot, and I did not know then that it would end up being the whole point of my life. She said, "Some things you do not announce, Delia. You just record them." That night she gave me the spare key to the back door. She took it off the ring in the drawer, and she fastened it to my key ring with a red twist tie from the bread bag, because the little metal loop on it was broken and she did not have a spare split ring. She said it would hold until she got one. She never got one. That key wrote on my keys for 6 years on a red twist tie, and I never replaced it, because replacing it would have meant deciding what it meant. Now, if you have ever been the person who covered the shortfall and was asked not to mention it, the one who fixed the thing and then handed the credit to somebody louder because it was easier for everyone, drop a comment, just one word. I want to know I am not the only one who understands what it feels like to be trusted with the truth and excluded from the story. My mother died on a Tuesday in October, at 6:40 in the morning, in the hospital in Springfield after 9 days, not on the porch. I still think about that. I was there. My older brother arrived 40 minutes after, and Tobias flew in from Denver that night. The first 3 days were normal, which is to say we were all decent to each other, in the specific way that grief makes people decent. We picked a casket. We argued gently about hymns. Gareth handled the funeral home, and he handled it well, and I told him so, and I meant it. The turn happened on day 4, in the parking lot of the funeral home, and it happened in a single sentence. Gareth was leaning against his truck with his sunglasses pushed up on his head. He said, So obviously the house comes to me. Not a question, not a proposal, an observation about the weather. I asked him what made it obvious. He said, Dad always said the house stays with the family name. Tobias looked at his shoes. My Aunt Fern, my mother's older sister, was standing 4 feet away with a foil pan of something, and she said, Now is not the time, but Gareth is right, that a house needs a man in it. Here is what my professional instinct registered in that parking lot. It was not the claim. People make claims. It was the tense. He had said comes, present tense, as if a transfer were already in motion. In my work, when a party speaks about a conveyance in the present tense before any instrument exists, it usually means they have already begun to act as if it does. I asked one more question. I asked whether he had been in the house since she went into the hospital. He said, somebody had to check on it. That night, I did something I am not proud of. Or rather, I am not sure how I feel about it even now. I did not call him out. I went back to my hotel. I opened the recorder's portal, and I ran a search on the parcel to confirm nothing new had been filed. Nothing had. Then I called my mentor. Bettina Nye has been in title work for 31 years, and she drinks black coffee out of a mug with no writing on it, because she says slogans are a liability. It was almost 11 at night. She picked up on the second ring. I told her the whole thing. The payoff, the deed, the parking lot, the tense of the verb. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, Delia, you are going to want to be reasonable, and I need you to hear me. You have a recorded remainder interest. You do not have a negotiation. Do not let them turn a recorded fact into a family discussion, because a discussion has 2 sides, and a recording does not. Then she said the thing that actually scared me. Do not go down there and let them workshop it out of you. Because that was the risk. Not that they would take the house. They could not take the house. The risk was that I would sit at that kitchen table, under the weight of 37 years of being the one who makes it easier for everyone, and I would sign something to stop the room from being uncomfortable. I drove to Corley on day 11 anyway. I want to tell you honestly why, because it is not a strong reason, and I am not going to dress it up. There were 3 boxes of my mother's kitchen things I wanted, her orange-handled scissors, and I wanted to sit on that porch with the bad corner of screen and hear it breathe one time while the house was still hers in the way it had always been hers. That is all. I drove 2 hours and 11 minutes for a sound. I got there at 4:15 in the afternoon. Gareth's truck was in the driveway, and there were 2 vehicles I did not recognize parked on the grass. I went to the back door, the way I have gone into that house since I was 5 years old, and I put the key with the red twist tie into the lock, and it went in about 1/3 of the way and stopped. I stood there for maybe 15 seconds, not moving, my hand still on it. Then I did what I do. I looked at the strike plate, and I saw fresh brass screws with the bit marks still bright on them, and I looked at the cylinder and saw a different manufacturer's face than the one that had been in that door since the Clinton administration. I walked around to the front. New knob, new deadbolt. 3 feet of curled shavings from the drill still in the mulch under the porch light, which nobody had swept up, which somehow bothered me more than anything else. I knocked on the door of my own house. He answered it holding a beer. He did not look guilty. That is the part I need you to understand. There was no flicker. He looked mildly inconvenienced, the way you look when the doorbell rings during a game. He said, "Oh, hey, I did the locks. There have been break-ins on 3rd. Behind him I could see into the front room. My mother's chair had been moved. There was a laptop open on the dining table with a spreadsheet on the screen, and a man in a quarter-zip pullover sitting in front of it, and a woman with a clipboard standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at the ceiling the way people look at a ceiling when they are estimating. I asked who they were. He said, "Just getting a sense of the numbers. Kevin does comps." A realtor, a contractor, in a house whose owner had been dead for 11 days and whose funeral was in the morning. He let me in, eventually, to get my boxes. He stood in the kitchen doorway and watched me pack them, not hostile, chatty. He told me about a bathroom he was going to gut. He said the word equity 4 times. And then, while I was wrapping the scissors in a dish towel, he said the sentence that made everything simple. He said, "I am not going to be a jerk about it. Whatever the will says, we will make it fair. Tobias does not need anything. He is doing fine. And you are. You know. You have your own thing. You do not have kids." That was the discovery. Not a document, not a message I was not supposed to see, just my brother, in our mother's kitchen, casually explaining the formula by which my entire life had been assessed and found to require nothing. I did not say anything. I finished wrapping the scissors. Something changed in me right there, at the counter, with the dish towel in my hands. Not heat, the opposite. A kind of cold clarity that I recognized from work. The specific stillness I get when I am 40 minutes into an examination, and I find the gap in the chain, and I know the closing is not going to happen. I do not get angry at that moment. I get precise. I stop asking what people intended, and I start reading only what was actually filed. I stood in my mother's kitchen, and I filed that sentence the way I file every operational fact, without comment, in order, where I could find it again. Then I asked him one question, and I asked it flat, because I wanted the answer on the record in my own memory. I asked, "Gareth, did Mom ever talk to you about the deed?" He said, "What deed?" And I said, "Okay." What I did next, I planned in the time it takes to carry 3 boxes to a car. If you have ever stood in a doorway that used to be yours and found out the key no longer fits, stay with me. Subscribe, because you will want to see how this lands. But tell me this, because it is the question I have turned over more than any other. Would you have shown him the deed right there in that kitchen, in front of the realtor, on the night before our mother's funeral? Or would you have waited until after we buried her, the way I did? I have never been sure I chose right. I did not go to a hotel. I drove to Marysville, and I sat in my car outside a closed law office, and I called Louise Fenner's after-hours line, and she called me back in 19 minutes from her daughter's volleyball game. We did 3 things that night, and the following morning, and none of them were dramatic. First, she prepared an affidavit of death of life tenant. That is the instrument that closes the loop. My mother's life estate ended at 6:40 in the morning on a Tuesday, and this document, filed with a certified copy of the death certificate, makes the public record reflect what the law already did automatically. It does not transfer anything. It announces something that has already happened. Second, at 8:05 the next morning, before the service, I walked into the county recorder's office. Priya Raghunathan was at the counter, and the green beaded chain on her glasses is the same one, 6 years older. She has known me since I was 16, and reading plat maps in her basement. She looked at the affidavit, and then she looked at the deed reference, and then she looked at me for about 2 seconds longer than a clerk needs to look at a customer. She said, "Was that your mother's service today?" I said it was, at 11. She did not say she was sorry, which I appreciated more than I can explain. She stamped the instrument, wrote the volume and page in her small, precise hand on my copy, took my fee, and said, "It is recorded." Then she said, "Go on. You will be late." Third, I called a locksmith. His name was Odell Trask, and he was the same man who had cut keys for my father, and he drove a van with a thermos bungee corded to the passenger seat because the cup holder was broken. I told him what I needed and when. He asked me one question, which was whether I could show him an interest in the property, and I put the recorded deed and the stamped affidavit on the hood of his van, and he read both of them all the way through, slowly, moving his lips slightly. Then he said, 11 o'clock service. I will be there at noon. I did not tell my brother any of it. The service was at Corley Methodist, and it was, I want to be fair, beautiful. My brother spoke, and he was good at it. He talked about her hands. 34 people came back to the fellowship hall afterward for the luncheon, which I know because I counted them while the pastor was praying, because counting is what I do with my hands when I cannot do anything else. Foil pans, scalloped potatoes, 2 crock pots of meatballs, sheet cake with a photocopy of her wedding portrait printed in edible ink on the frosting, which Aunt Fern had arranged and which nobody knew how to cut. I sat at a folding table with Tobias on one side of me, and my mother's neighbor Ruth Ann on the other. In my coat pocket was a manila envelope, 9 by 12, unsealed. Inside it was a certified copy of the 2019 warranty deed with the reserved life estate, the recorded affidavit from that morning with Priya's stamp still smelling faintly of ink, the payoff confirmation from February of 2019, and a one-page letter from Louise on her letterhead. On top of the envelope, in my pocket, was my key ring with the useless key still on it. I had decided I would not raise it. I need you to know that. I had decided that if he let that room stay a funeral, I would drive home and send the envelope by certified mail on Monday, and let a process be a process. He stood up at 12:20 with a plastic cup of lemonade and tapped it with a fork. He thanked everyone for coming. He said some true things about our mother. Then he said, "While we are all together, family business, real quick." He said that the house on Ferris Row was staying in the family. Applause, actual applause, from a foil pan buffet. He said he and Sabine would be moving in after some work. He said Kevin thought the place could be worth a lot with the right kitchen. And then he turned to me, in front of every person in that room, and he said, "Delia, I know you have got sentimental stuff about the place, and I am not trying to be cold, but I am going to need you to sign off on the estate paperwork, so we can get moving before the taxes come due. You are the one who understands all that. Do not make this hard. Do not make this hard." Aunt Fern said, "That is all any of us want, is for it to be easy." Somebody's grandchild dropped a fork. I counted 9 seconds. I know it was 9 because I count. 9 seconds is a long time in a room that full. The furnace in that fellowship hall came on at about second 4, and I could hear the lemonade cooler ticking, and I could hear a woman near the coffee urn stop stirring. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I reached into my coat, and I set the envelope on the folding table, and I slid it about 8 inches toward my brother. Then I set my key ring on top of it, with the key and its red wire facing up. I said one sentence. I said, "The house was conveyed to me in 2019, and it is recorded." He laughed. One syllable, not a real laugh. He said, "Okay, sure." He opened the envelope, the way you open a bill you have already decided not to pay. He read the first page. And I watched a thing happen to his face that I have only otherwise seen across a closing table, when a seller understands that the survey has been read. The smile stayed for one more second after his eyes had already gone. Then the color left the top of his face first, forehead down, which I did not know was how it happened. He said, "This says a life estate." I said, "Yes." He said, "She never told me." I said, "No, she did not." He went to the second page, Priya's stamp, that morning, 8:05. He said, "You filed this today." I said, "This morning, before the service. It is the affidavit of death of life tenant. Her interest ended when she died. The rest was already mine." Aunt Fern came around the end of the table then, and this is where it stopped being about a document. She said my mother had not been in her right mind in 2019. She said I had taken advantage of a widow 4 months after her husband died. She said, and I will remember the exact phrasing, "You made her sign that." I did not defend myself. That is the only strategic thing I want anyone to take from this. When you have a recorded fact, defending it is what turns it back into an argument. I said, "Louise Fenner drafted it. Her number is in the letter. She has the file, the notary log, and her contemporaneous notes." Fern's mouth worked. She said, "Family does not do this to family." Tobias, beside me, said quietly, without looking up, "Fern, she paid off Mom's mortgage." First time he had spoken in the room. Then he said, "I knew that part. I did not know about the rest, but I knew that part, and I never said anything either." "Where's the payoff confirmation?" He was on page 3 by then. Which was the payoff confirmation? $61,400, February 2019. Wire reference, my name. He said, "You never told us." And here is the sentence I had not planned. It came out level, and I have thought about it every day since. I said, "She asked me not to. She said you would make it about being embarrassed. and then she would have to comfort you about her own house. I kept that promise for 6 years, Gareth. 11 days ago, you changed the locks on a house you did not own, and I still waited until after we buried her." Nobody said anything. Ruth Ann, my mother's neighbor, 70-something with a cardigan and a paper plate, reached over and put her hand flat on my forearm for about 2 seconds, and then took it back. She did not look at me. She did not say a word. She just made sure I felt a hand. My phone buzzed face down on the table at 12:41. I did not pick it up in front of them. It was Odell. 2 words and a photograph of a small brass key on a fresh-cut blank. He had rekeyed all 3 locks. He had gone at noon, while the rest of us were eating scalloped potatoes. If you have ever sat in a room where 34 people went quiet at the same time, and the silence itself did the accusing so that nobody had to, hit subscribe, or share this with someone who needs to hear it. You will want to hear what happened after. I drove home that night with 3 boxes in my back seat and my mother's scissors on the passenger side where I could see them. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel satisfied. I felt the way I feel at the end of a closing that fell apart for a reason I found. Correct, and tired, and sorry about it. I got to my apartment at 9:20, and I sat on my own kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher, and I took the key off my ring, the old one that did not open anything anymore, and I moved the red twist tie to the new key that Odell had left in my mailbox. It took me a minute to get it tight. My hands were not steady. Here is what happened over the following months, factually, without decoration. My brother had spent about $4,000. Locks, a dumpster rental, a deposit to Kevin's contractor, and a permit application he had filed in his own name for a bathroom in a house he did not own. He did not get any of it back. The permit was voided. Louise sent 1 letter. Fern's attorney, a man in Urbana, looked at the 2019 instrument and the notary log and the drafting file and declined to take it further. There was no lawsuit. There was never going to be one. That is the thing about a properly recorded conveyance. It is boring, and boring is the strongest thing you can be. The extended family split roughly 70-30 against me, and I want to be honest, that 70-30 against felt worse than I expected, even though I had been braced for 100. Fern has not spoken to me. Uncle Denny unfriended me on Facebook, and then sent me a message asking if I would consider selling to my brother at a family rate. Tobias calls now. About every 2 weeks. We are not close. We are closer. And then in December, 7 weeks after, I got a text from Ren. Ren is Gareth's daughter. She was 19 and in her 2nd year at Wright State. She wrote, and I am reading it exactly. I didn't know what a life estate was, so I looked it up. I read like 4 articles. Grandma gave it to you while she was alive. That's not the same as a will, is it? My dad keeps saying she left it to you, and I keep thinking that's not the same thing. Anyway, I am sorry about the locks. I was there when he called the guy and I didn't say anything. I read that in a parking garage and I had to sit for a minute. I did not celebrate it. It did not fix anything. Her father still tells the story his way at every gathering I am not at. But a 19-year-old read 4 articles about a property interest, so she could understand whether her family was being fair, and that is more than any adult in my family did in 6 years. I wrote back that she did not owe me an apology for something she was not in charge of, and that I would answer any question she ever had about how any of it worked. If this story reached something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Here is where I landed with my brother, and I want to be specific because I think the specifics are the only honest part. I wrote him 1 letter in January. I offered 3 things. I offered to sit down with him and a HUD-certified housing counselor in Springfield, on my dime, to look at what he could actually afford. I offered him the contents of the house, all of it, the furniture and the tools and my father's table saw, and I meant it and he took the saw. And I offered him first refusal at market value if I ever sell, with an appraisal he could pick. I did not offer him the house. I did not offer him a family rate. I am not required to fund his plan with the money I took a retirement penalty to protect. He has not answered the letter. The saw is gone from the garage. Was there a moment when you found out that the help you had been giving your family had quietly been reclassified as your obligation? Not a favor anymore, just a standing feature of the arrangement. Tell me about that moment. I read every one. I do not live in that house. I rent it, at a fair rate, to a nurse and her 2 kids, and last spring I paid a man to redo the screened porch, and I asked him to leave the corner alone. He thought I was joking. I had to explain twice that I wanted the wrong gauge staples left in place. That one corner still breathes when the wind comes off the reservoir, and the nurse's youngest apparently sleeps right through it, which is how you know it is a family house. Here is what 15 years of reading other people's chains of title taught me, and what it took my own mother's death to make me understand about my own. Everyone in my family had an opinion about who deserved that place. Opinions are free, and they are loud, and they arrive with foil pans. But the county does not record opinions. It records instruments. My brother spent 11 days acting like an owner, and he had a locksmith and a realtor and a room full of people nodding along, and none of that produced a single line in a single volume in a basement in Corley, Ohio. I did not win because I was right. I won because 6 years earlier, my mother sat down in a lawyer's office in February and said out loud what she wanted, and we wrote it down, and we paid a fee, and a woman with green beads on her glasses put a stamp on it. That is my story. I still have that key on my ring, the old one, the useless one. I never threw it away. It is on a red twist tie that my mother put there because the loop was broken and she did not have a spare, and she said it would hold until she got one, and it held for 6 years and it is still holding. And now, if you are watching this, I want to ask you something. Would you have waited like I did and let your brother stand up in a fellowship hall and say it out loud in front of every cousin and neighbor she had before you put the envelope on the table? Or would you have handed him the deed in that kitchen the night before, in front of the realtor, and spared everyone the room? If this story stayed with you, drop a comment. Tell me one word. Recorded. Because that is what I want every person watching this to understand. My mother said some things you do not announce. You just record. And she was right. Love that only exists in a private smile at the dinner table cannot protect anybody, but love that gets written down, dated, and stamped will still be standing there for you 11 days after you are gone. This story is fictional, created for dramatic entertainment, education, and reflection. But the lesson underneath it is real. The people who talk the loudest about what a family deserves are almost never the people who took the time to write anything down.